I had never imagined that the fate of the galaxy would begin in silence. My shuttle drifted toward Helios Prime, the immense orbital station where the Galactic Council of Civilizations had gathered an emergency session. From the viewport, hundreds of warships surrounded the station, vessels from empires that had ruled the stars for thousands of years. Somewhere among them floated the ships of the United Earth Federation, still newcomers in a galaxy that measured history in millennia. As the docking clamps locked into place, I straightened the collar of my dress uniform and took a slow breath. I wasn't here as a soldier today. I was here to speak for humanity. The council chamber was breathtaking. Representatives from dozens of civilizations filled the towering tiers beneath a crystal dome that reflected the stars themselves. Ancient species whispered among themselves while enormous holograms displayed the scarred surface of Arkas-7, the world where the war between Earth and the Sairen Dominion had reached its terrible conclusion. Except the war hadn't truly ended there. Thousands of soldiers from both sides had vanished during the final battle. No wreckage, no bodies, only unanswered questions. Mysterious transmissions still echoed from beneath the planet's surface, and every attempt to investigate had ended in failure. The chamber buzzed with accusations before the session had even officially begun. The Sirens blamed humanity. Our government blamed them. Everyone demanded answers. As I looked around the room, I realized something unsettling. No one was searching for the truth anymore. They were searching for someone to blame. The High Chancellor struck the crystal dais with his staff, and the echoes rolled through the chamber until every voice fell silent. The council will hear the charges. A towering Siren commander rose first. His silver armor still bore the scars of Arkas-7, and the expression on his narrow face promised anything but peace. The United Earth Federation deployed forbidden technology, he declared. Our divisions did not retreat. They did not surrender. They ceased to exist. Humanity violated every law that governs civilized warfare. A wave of murmurs spread through the chamber. Before I could react, Ambassador Helen Brooks stood from Earth's delegation. The accusation is false, she answered calmly. Human forces suffered the same fate. We lost thousands of soldiers during the final engagement. If a prohibited weapon was used, it was not ours. The arguments exploded again. Delegates demanded evidence. Military analysts projected tactical maps over the chamber, replaying the final minutes of the battle. Human battalions advanced through shattered trenches while Siren armored columns pushed from the opposite ridge. Then the recordings dissolved into static. Entire formations vanished in the blink of an eye. Sensors failed. Communications died. The only thing left behind was silence. No fleet possessed a weapon capable of producing such an effect. At least, none that the council officially recognized. Another representative rose. Long-range listening stations continue receiving transmissions from beneath Arkas-7. We have identified voices belonging to soldiers reported missing. A recording filled the chamber. Fragments of desperate calls echoed through hidden speakers. Someone begged for medical assistance. Someone repeated coordinates that no longer existed. Another voice whispered, over and over, "Don't let it wake." The message ended in harsh static. Even the loudest delegates remained silent. For a brief moment, fear replaced anger. The Chancellor folded his hands. If neither side employed an illegal weapon, then another force intervened. Until we determine the truth, this council stands on the edge of another interstellar war. His words settled over the chamber like cold ash. I looked around the room and realized that every civilization was preparing for the same future. Not peace. Another war. No one noticed when I stood. That alone said everything about humanity's place in the council. The chamber remained locked in argument. Ancient empires traded accusations with practiced elegance. Diplomats quoted treaties older than my entire civilization, and military advisors demanded sanctions before an investigation had even begun. To them, the United Earth Federation was still the youngest voice in the room, a nation too new to deserve much attention. I waited. Eventually, the Chancellor noticed. The representative from Earth has requested the floor. Only then did the arguments fade. Hundreds of eyes turned toward me. Some carried curiosity. Most carried impatience. I stepped onto the central platform beneath the white beam of light. The polished crystal reflected my boots as though asking whether I truly belonged there. Perhaps I didn't. Not in their eyes. I looked across the chamber, recognizing faces that had commanded fleets long before humans had discovered electricity. Their civilizations measured history in epochs. Mine measured it in generations. To them, I was simply Lieutenant Jake Carter. A junior officer. An inexperienced diplomat. Another human who had survived a war no one believed humanity should have fought in the first place. The Sairen Marshal folded his arms. Has Earth finally decided to confess? A few delegates chuckled. Others simply watched, waiting for another political statement they could ignore. I let the silence stretch. During the war, I had learned something valuable. People often revealed more while waiting than while speaking. When every whisper had faded, I finally raised my head. They listened to every accusation made today. No one interrupted. They debated weapons. I paused. They debated military doctrine. Another pause. They debated which civilization deserves the blame. The Chancellor leaned forward slightly. But none of you has asked the only question that matters. The chamber became perfectly still. If ARKAS-7 wasn't caused by humanity. I slowly turned toward the Sairen delegation. And it wasn't caused by the Dominion. My gaze swept across every delegation in the chamber. Then who wanted this war badly enough to make both sides believe the other had started it? For the first time since the session had begun, no one had an answer. The silence lingered. It spread through the council chamber like a slow-moving tide, washing away the arguments that had filled the room only moments before. Even the translators stopped whispering. Hundreds of delegates watched me, waiting for evidence, for military reports, for another accusation aimed across the chamber. Instead, I took a single breath. You are all looking in the wrong direction, I said quietly. The Sairen Marshal frowned. What does that mean, Lieutenant? It means ARKAS-7 cannot be explained by politics. I looked toward the enormous hologram of the ruined planet suspended above us. It cannot be explained by strategy. My voice echoed beneath the crystal dome. And it certainly cannot be explained by blaming one civilization for everything that happened. Several delegates exchanged puzzled glances. One of the elder ambassadors rose from his seat. If you possess evidence, present it. If not, stop wasting the council's time. A few heads nodded in agreement. To them, I was still the inexperienced human officer standing where diplomats with centuries of service usually stood. I reached into my uniform and removed a small black data crystal. It contained no classified weapon designs, no battle plans, no intercepted communications, only a handful of recordings. I do have evidence, I replied. But before I show it, you must understand why it exists. The Chancellor studied me carefully. Proceed. I closed my hand around the crystal. The answer to ARKAS-7 is not hidden inside a secret laboratory. I paused. It is not buried beneath military intelligence. Another pause. It began with a single decision made in the middle of the battlefield. Confused murmurs spread across the chamber. The Sairen Marshal gave a dismissive laugh. A single decision? Yes. I met his eyes without hesitation. She was left to die. Every delegate became still, until one human changed the fate of the entire galaxy. The words hung in the air. For several heartbeats, no one spoke. Then laughter erupted across the chamber. Some delegates shook their heads. Others openly mocked the idea. The destiny of billions? One ambassador scoffed. Because of one wounded soldier? Another laughed louder. Human sentiment has finally replaced human reason. Even members of the Sairen delegation smiled with disbelief. Only the Chancellor remained silent. His ancient eyes never left mine. Unlike the others, he had stopped laughing. The laughter rolled across the chamber in waves. Ancient ambassadors leaned back in their seats, some amused, others openly insulted that I had interrupted a crisis with what they believed was a sentimental story. The Karashi delegate struck his staff against the floor as he laughed, while a pair of Varelian historians exchanged knowing smiles, convinced they had just witnessed another example of human idealism overwhelming human judgment. A wounded enemy? One ambassador said between laughs. That is your explanation for 80,000 missing soldiers? Another shook his head. The younger species always mistake coincidence for destiny. The Sairen Marshal crossed his arms. You expect this council to believe that a single act of mercy accomplished what fleets and governments could not? I expect nothing, I answered. I only intend to tell the truth. His expression hardened. Truth requires evidence. It does. The chamber slowly quieted again, though scattered chuckles continued from the upper tiers. I didn't react. If I had learned anything during the war, it was that people often laughed at the things they feared most to understand. The Chancellor finally spoke. You claim one wounded soldier changed history. Yes, and this soldier belonged to the Sairen Dominion? She did. Every Sairen representative looked toward me. The Dominion abandoned one of its own officers? I nodded once. She had been critically wounded during the final assault. Communications had collapsed. Her command believed she was already dead. The Marshal's face darkened. You know her identity? I do. State it. Lyra Voss. The reaction was immediate. Several Sairen officers stiffened. Others looked at one another with unmistakable surprise. The Marshal's voice became dangerously quiet. Commander Lyra Voss was listed among the missing after ARKAS 7. I know. Then your statement is impossible. No, I replied evenly. It is merely incomplete. I looked around the chamber one last time before placing the black data crystal onto the central console. You have spent months investigating vanished armies. My hand rested on the crystal. I spent those same months investigating one survivor. The room fell silent once more. This recording begins 6 hours after the final battle. I activated the crystal. The chamber lights dimmed. The first image flickered into existence. And for the first time since the council had assembled, every delegate stopped looking at me and began looking at the truth. The hologram flickered, replacing the image of the council chamber with a battlefield drowned in smoke. The timestamp identified it as a helmet recording recovered from ARKAS 7. Burned armor littered the ground. Destroyed walkers smoldered in the distance. The only sounds were crackling fires and distant artillery fading into silence. I recorded this myself, I said. 6 hours after the final engagement. Every delegate watched without speaking. The camera moved through shattered trenches, stepping over abandoned weapons belonging to both armies. Human and Sairen dead lay where they had fallen. There was no victory here. Only exhaustion. Then the recording stopped. A faint voice called for help. Once. Twice. Barely audible. The image turned toward a collapsed bunker half buried beneath rubble. A section of reinforced plating had caved inward. Beneath it, someone was still alive. The hologram zoomed closer. A Sairen officer struggled to breathe, her silver combat armor fractured across the chest. One arm was trapped beneath twisted metal. Blood stained the cracked plates. Her sidearm lay several meters away, beyond reach. Gasps spread across the chamber. Lyra Voss, whispered one of the Sairen delegates. She looked directly into my helmet camera. I know who you are, she said weakly. Finish it. No hatred. No fear. Only acceptance. She believed no one would rescue her. The recording showed me kneeling beside her. They lost too much blood, I answered. She gave a tired laugh. You noticed. I can get you out. You shouldn't, Her breathing grew slower. My command retreated hours ago. Yours will shoot me the moment they see me. I shook my head. They had to argue with me first. Several delegates exchanged uncertain glances. On the recording, I cut away twisted beams with an emergency plasma torch, ignoring warning alarms from my damaged suit. Every second increased the risk of another collapse. Lyra stared at me in disbelief. Why? I paused before answering. Because leaving you here won't bring my friends back. The chamber remained utterly silent. No one laughed anymore. They simply watched as one human soldier reached beneath the wreckage and refused to leave his enemy behind. The recording continued. I slid my rifle across my back and forced the twisted support beam upward with both hands. The warning display inside my helmet flashed red. My suit reported structural instability, muscle strain, and the possibility of another collapse. I ignored every alert. Lyra watched me with growing disbelief. Bury us both, she whispered. Not today. The beam shifted just enough. I wedged a broken section of alloy beneath it, creating a narrow opening before reaching for her trapped arm. She gritted her teeth as I pulled the crushed metal away. The pain was immediate. She cried out, then collapsed back against the debris, barely conscious. My leg, she gasped. I looked down. A fractured support rod had pierced the lower section of her armor. It had missed the artery by centimeters. Lucky, or perhaps unlucky enough to survive. I cut away the damaged plating with the plasma torch. Molten sparks filled the air while smoke drifted through the ruined bunker. You know, Lyra said between strained breaths, this violates at least 6 military protocols. I couldn't help smiling. I stopped counting after the third. For the first time since the recording had begun, a faint smile appeared on her face. It disappeared as another tremor shook the bunker. Dust poured from the cracked ceiling. The battlefield above us wasn't quiet anymore. Heavy footsteps echoed through the ruins. Not human, not Sairen. The sound was mechanical. I froze. Lyra heard it too. They're still here, she whispered. The recording microphone captured the slow metallic rhythm. One step. Another. Closer. I extinguished the plasma torch and switched off my helmet lamp. Darkness swallowed the bunker as only thin shafts of daylight slipped through fractured concrete. The footsteps stopped directly overhead. Neither of us moved. Neither of us breathed. Then came a sound I had never heard before. A low electronic tone. Almost like something searching. The recording filled with bursts of static. My visor flickered as every communication channel died at once. Lyra stared at me. What was that? I answered with the only truthful response I had. I don't know. Outside, the mechanical footsteps resumed. Slow, patient, as if whatever walked above us already knew exactly where we were. The footsteps circled the bunker with perfect rhythm. Not once did they hesitate. Not once did they quicken. Whoever, or whatever, was outside wasn't searching anymore. It already knew we were beneath the collapsed structure. It was simply deciding when to come inside. I slowly reached for my rifle. The ammunition counter blinked across my visor. 9 rounds. That was all I had left. Lyra noticed. If it's one of ours, she whispered, they'll execute you. If it's one of yours, they'll execute you too. A weak smile crossed her face. Fair point. The mechanical tone returned. This time it was louder. My helmet display filled with interference before every system suddenly rebooted on its own. Navigation vanished. Communications disappeared. Even the tactical map dissolved into static. Only one message remained. Signal acquired. I didn't activate anything, I muttered. I know, Lyra answered. The bunker trembled again. A section of the ceiling collapsed behind us, filling the room with dust and exposing a narrow passage leading deeper beneath the battlefield. Neither of us had noticed it before. Ancient walls stretched into darkness, carved from black stone unlike anything the Federation or the Dominion had ever built. Lyra stared at the passage. That wasn't on our maps. It wasn't on ours either. The metallic footsteps stopped above us. Silence. Then the sound of tearing steel. Something was opening the bunker from the outside. We have to move, I said. You can barely carry me. I'll manage. I slipped one of her arms over my shoulder and pulled her upright. She bit down hard enough to keep from crying out as weight settled onto her injured leg. Together we stumbled toward the newly revealed corridor. Behind us, daylight burst into the bunker as armored doors were ripped away with frightening ease. I risked one glance. A machine stood in the opening. Humanoid. Nearly 3 meters tall. Its black alloy body carried no insignia, no markings, no indication of who had built it. A single crimson sensor stared directly at us. It did not raise a weapon. Instead, it spoke with a calm synthetic voice. Witnesses detected. A brief pause followed. Erasure protocol initiated. The machine stepped forward, and we ran into the darkness beneath ARKAS-7, not knowing that every step was carrying us toward the secret that had started a war spanning decades. The corridor swallowed us the moment we crossed its threshold. Behind us, the machine entered the bunker without haste. Metal scraped against broken concrete, followed by the calm, emotionless cadence of its synthetic voice. Escape attempt confirmed. Priority unchanged. Erasure protocol continues. I tightened my grip around Lyra as we stumbled deeper into the darkness. The passage sloped downward beneath ARKAS-7, its walls carved from polished black stone unlike any alloy either the Federation or the Dominion had ever catalogued. Thin lines of pale blue light awakened beneath our feet, spreading ahead as though the corridor itself knew we had arrived. I don't like this, Lyra whispered. I was about to say the same. The air grew warmer with every step. There was no dust, no rubble, no signs of collapse. Everything below the battlefield looked untouched by time, as if the war raging above had never existed. Behind us came another metallic footstep. Closer. I looked over my shoulder. The machine had entered the corridor. Its crimson eye never blinked. It never hurried. It simply continued walking toward us with terrifying certainty. I raised my rifle. 9 rounds. Against something I knew nothing about. Lyra, yes? If I tell you to run. She laughed weakly. I can barely stand. Then crawl. And leave you? I didn't answer. Instead, I fired. The first round struck the machine's chest, showering sparks across the corridor. The second hit its shoulder. The third shattered against its head. None of them slowed it. The crimson eye remained fixed on us. Ballistic weapons ineffective, the machine announced. Updating tactical assessment. I lowered the rifle. 7 rounds remained. 7 useless rounds. Suddenly, the blue lines covering the floor flared brighter. The entire corridor vibrated. A deep mechanical hum echoed through the stone, followed by a voice unlike the hunter's cold monotone. Older, calmer, almost welcoming. Biological signatures confirmed. The pursuing machine stopped instantly. Its head tilted upward. For the first time, it hesitated. Then it spoke. Primary archive has awakened. A circular doorway appeared ahead, unfolding silently from the solid wall. Beyond it waited an enormous chamber filled with towering pillars, suspended rings of light, and thousands of floating symbols rotating through the air. At the chamber's center stood a crystalline structure reaching toward the ceiling like a frozen tree. Lyra stared in disbelief. What is this place? I could only shake my head. I think. My voice faded as the ancient structure pulsed with light. This is where the war truly began. The chamber stretched farther than my helmet lights could reach. Countless rings of pale energy drifted through the darkness, orbiting the crystalline structure at its center with impossible precision. Symbols flowed across the air like living equations, constantly changing before dissolving into new patterns. None belonged to any language recorded by the Federation or the Dominion. Behind us, the hunter remained outside the circular entrance. It did not advance. It simply stood motionless, almost waiting. Lyra leaned against one of the black pillars, struggling to stay upright. Why did it stop? I don't think it had a choice. As if answering, the calm ancient voice echoed through the chamber once more. Defender Unit Designation 7. Command authority revoked. The crimson eye of the machine flickered. For the first time, uncertainty entered its synthetic tone. Authority challenge acknowledged. A pulse of blue light swept across the chamber. The machine lowered its head. Then, without resistance, it stepped backward until it disappeared beyond the doorway. Neither of us spoke. Whatever controlled this place possessed absolute authority over the thing that had hunted us across the battlefield. The crystalline structure brightened. Thousands of symbols converged above its surface before rearranging into images. Stars. Entire galaxies. Then, silence. A voice emerged, older than anything I had ever heard. Archive awakening complete. Civilization status request. No response came. Again the voice spoke. No custodians detected. Elapsed interval. The pause lasted several seconds. 118,412 standard cycles. Lyra slowly looked at me. I don't think this place knows we're not supposed to be here. I don't think anyone was supposed to be here. The symbols shifted again. This time they formed countless red points spreading across a spiral galaxy. Each point vanished, one after another. Entire civilizations erased in absolute silence. A final message appeared beneath them. Containment failed. Another followed. Last protocol activated. The chamber darkened. Then every floating symbol turned toward us simultaneously. The ancient voice spoke one final sentence. 2 biological custodians detected. There was a pause. Then words that froze the blood in my veins. Human genetic profile confirmed. Succession protocol initiated. Neither of us moved. The words echoed through the chamber long after the ancient voice had fallen silent. Human genetic profile confirmed. Succession protocol initiated. Lyra stared at me. What does succession mean? I wish I knew. The crystalline structure brightened again, and thousands of symbols merged into a single rotating sphere. Entire star systems appeared across its surface before dissolving into unfamiliar constellations. Every image carried the same conclusion. War, collapse, silence. Then another civilization, another collapse, another silence. The archive wasn't showing history. It was showing repetition. The ancient voice returned. Custodian civilization designation, humanity. Status verification failed. Probability of extinction, expected. I frowned. Expected? The chamber answered. Original custodians departed. Successor species designated. Implementation incomplete. Lyra looked from the holograms to me. They were waiting for humans. Before I could answer, another image formed above the crystal. Earth. Not the modern world. An ancient Earth wrapped in ice, storms, and volcanic fire. The image slowly rotated while streams of information surrounded it. Candidate species evaluation. Extreme environmental adaptation, confirmed. Psychological resilience, confirmed. Survival behavior under mass extinction, confirmed. More lines appeared. Probability of maintaining containment, 97.4%. Lyra whispered, almost to herself. They chose you. No. I kept watching the projection. I think they predicted us. The chamber trembled. A sharp alarm echoed through the darkness. For the first time, the calm ancient voice carried urgency. Containment breach expanding. Defender units compromised. Emergency authority transfer required. The crystal at the center unfolded like a flower, revealing a narrow column of white light. It stopped directly in front of me. Human successor acknowledged. Accept command, or containment failure becomes irreversible. Before I could react, the hunter reappeared beyond the doorway. Its crimson eye burned brighter than before. Its voice had changed. No longer calm, no longer obedient. Succession rejected. We will preserve the protocol. The machine raised its weapon for the first time. Then every light inside the archive turned red. The chamber erupted into motion. Every crimson light ignited at once, washing the ancient archive in the color of emergency. The floating rings that had drifted peacefully around the crystal accelerated until they became solid circles of light. Beneath my boots, the black floor split apart, revealing streams of white energy racing toward the central column. The machine stepped through the doorway. Its weapon unfolded from beneath its right arm with mechanical precision. It resembled neither a rifle nor a cannon, but a narrow lattice of shifting metal surrounding a sphere of black light. The archive spoke before it could fire. Defender Unit 7, final command, stand down. The crimson eye flickered violently. For an instant, the machine froze. Then it answered in a voice distorted by conflicting instructions. Directive conflict detected. Primary protocol, preserve containment. Secondary protocol, prevent unauthorized succession. The ancient intelligence replied without hesitation. Authorization confirmed. Human successor verified. The machine raised its weapon anyway. Verification denied. Everything happened at once. Lyra shoved me aside just as the weapon discharged. There was no explosion, no flash, only a silent wave that erased an entire stone pillar from existence. Where it had stood a heartbeat earlier, nothing remained, not dust, not fragments, not even heat. The archive dimmed. Containment integrity reduced. 31%. Lyra struggled to breathe. They don't destroy. They erase, I finished. The machine advanced another step. Its voice became calm again. Organic witnesses will be removed. Protocol restored. The column of white light expanded around me. Warmth spread through every nerve as countless symbols rushed toward my visor. My helmet display filled with unfamiliar scripts before translating them automatically. Maps, star systems, weapons, vaults, protocols. Thousands of years of knowledge flooded into my mind faster than I could comprehend. The archive spoke directly to me. Custodian authority transferred. Containment network under human command. A single command appeared before my eyes. Authorized defender shut down. My hand hesitated above the glowing interface. One movement would end the machine forever. Another would leave the galaxy defenseless if the archive was wrong. The hunter stopped only meters away. For the first time since I had seen it, it addressed me, not as prey, but as an equal. You do not understand what sleeps beyond the containment line. Then, for the first time, I wondered whether the machine had been trying to kill us. Or trying to save us. The machine remained motionless. Its weapon never lowered, yet it did not fire again. You believe I am your enemy, it said. That assumption has repeated for 118,000 cycles. The archive answered immediately. Statement acknowledged. Probability of deception, 0. I looked from the machine to the crystal. Then tell me the truth. The chamber darkened. Every floating symbol vanished except one. A tear in space. Beyond it moved something without shape, a darkness that bent light instead of blocking it. Entire stars disappeared where it passed. Containment subject, the archive announced. It cannot be destroyed. It can only be isolated. Images followed one another. Ancient civilizations had built the containment network. When they weakened, the darkness spread. Every world it reached simply ceased to exist. The defenders had never been soldiers. They were wardens. Lyra stared silently. So every erased civilization, the machine completed her sentence, was sacrificed to preserve every civilization beyond the line. A chill ran through me. The wars? The archive responded. Manipulated. Conflicts generated to conceal containment operations. The disappearance at ARKAS-7 prevented universal exposure. Everything finally made sense. The missing fleets, the false evidence, the impossible recordings. None of it had been an invasion. It had been a quarantine. The archive spoke once more. Human successor. Final authorization required. A single command appeared before me. Restore containment. I knew what it meant. Every record of this place would vanish. The galaxy would never learn the truth. Neither side would receive justice. But billions would survive. Lyra met my eyes. They hate us. They survive. History will lie. I know. I placed my hand against the crystal. The chamber erupted with white light. The machine lowered its weapon. Authority accepted. Across the stars, ancient stations awakened. One after another. Invisible barriers closed. The darkness beyond the fracture receded. Then the archive spoke its final words. Containment restored. Custodian civilization acknowledged. Humanity now stands watch. The crystal dissolved into light. Only silence remained. Outside, the war had ended. Inside, only two witnesses would remember why. The recording ended. Light returned to the council chamber, but no one spoke. The accusations, the demands for justice, the arguments that had filled the hall only hours before had become meaningless. The war between the Federation and the Dominion had never been the true conflict. It had been a veil hiding something far older than either civilization. The Chancellor finally broke the silence. So humanity has guarded this secret ever since ARKAS-7? I met his eyes. No, they guarded it since that day. And we intend to keep guarding it. A Sairen delegate stood. Will we ever see the archive? No. Will we ever learn the full truth? Only if containment fails. No one asked another question. They understood the answer they had not received. The official record declared ARKAS-7 an unresolved military anomaly. The missing fleets remained listed as lost in action. Lyra Voss returned to her people. I returned to mine. Nothing else was ever published. Years later, the galaxy remembered the war. Humanity remembered the watch. Beyond the mapped frontier, ancient stations continued their silent patrol. No ceremonies marked their duty. No monuments carried their names. Only a handful of people knew that civilization still existed because someone had chosen responsibility over recognition. The council dismissed the session. I was the last to leave. Before the doors closed behind me, I looked once at the stars. Then I went back to work.